Today, a profound strategic paradox is shaping the economic and military posture of the Russian Federation. Despite its status as the world's third largest producer of crude oil, Russia now finds itself in the unprecedented position of needing to import gasoline. This situation is not the result of a typical market fluctuation, but rather the direct outcome of a methodical and sustained military campaign orchestrated by Ukraine, targeting the very core of Russia's energy infrastructure. For months, Ukrainian long-range unmanned aerial vehicles, or UAVs, have systematically targeted Russian oil refineries and depots. This strategy, which President Zelensky has referred to as a uniquely effective form of sanction, is directly pressuring the Kremlin's budget and undermining its capacity to wage war. The convergence of several critical factors has severely degraded Russia's domestic fuel production. These include an aging network of Soviet-era refineries, comprehensive Western sanctions that block access to essential foreign technology, and the relentless pressure of Ukrainian drone attacks. This has created a reality of severe fuel shortages and significant price increases for ordinary Russian citizens, with some reports indicating a 50% surge in prices at the pump. This combination of factors has created a perfect storm, crippling a sector that was once a cornerstone of the nation's economic strength. The central vulnerability for Russia lies not in its supply of crude oil, but in a critical bottleneck within its refining capabilities. Crude oil, in its raw form, is a complex mixture of hydrocarbons that must undergo sophisticated processing in specialized refineries to become usable products like gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel. To illustrate, a standard 42-gallon barrel of crude oil in the United States typically yields approximately 19 to 20 gallons of gasoline and 11 to 13 gallons of diesel. Although Russia's refining infrastructure appears extensive on paper, it is highly centralized. The country depends on about 30 major refineries, many of which are strategically clustered in the more populated western regions, or situated along key export pipelines that originate from the vast Siberian oil fields. This geographical concentration, once a logistical advantage, has now transformed these facilities into high-value strategic targets for Ukrainian military planners. The consequences of this vulnerability have been stark. By last month, it was estimated that 38% of Russia's total refining capacity, which amounts to nearly 338,000 tons per day, was offline due to either direct damage or extensive maintenance backlogs. This figure represents one of the highest shutdown rates reported to date and has led to a monthly deficit of approximately 400,000 tons of fuel. This shortfall accounts for roughly 1/5 of the nation's total consumption. As a result, even as Russia continues to export massive volumes of crude oil to the global market, its inability to process that same oil for domestic use has triggered widespread shortages and created a state of logistical paralysis. Across the country, gas stations are not running dry because of a lack of oil, but because of a lack of operational refineries to process it. Recognizing the practical impossibility of engaging Russia's numerically superior military in a conventional war of attrition, Ukrainian strategists have pivoted to a more innovative approach. Since the beginning of 2024, they have executed a sophisticated asymmetric strategy focused on degrading the logistical and economic pillars that sustain the Russian war machine. In 2024 alone, Ukrainian forces conducted at least 81 documented attacks on Russian oil refineries, fuel depots, and other related infrastructure across Russia, Crimea, and the occupied territories of Ukraine. The intensity of this strategic air campaign has escalated dramatically in 2025. Of Russia's 38 major refineries, a total of 21 have sustained direct hits from Ukrainian drones. These facilities, when combined, account for a substantial portion of Russia's total annual refining capacity of 327 million tons of crude oil, which is equivalent to approximately 6.5 million barrels per day. The 16 refineries that were struck in August and September of 2025 alone represented 123 million tons of annual capacity, a staggering 38% of Russia's entire refining power, underscoring the campaign's devastating effectiveness. A chronological review of several key strikes clearly illustrates the methodical and relentless nature of this campaign. On September 5th, Ukrainian drones targeted Rosneft's Ryazan refinery, a top 5 facility located just 200 kilometers southeast of Moscow. This plant, which produces nearly 18 million tons of fuel annually, serves as a primary supplier of gasoline and diesel for the entire capital region. Shortly thereafter, another strike was carried out against the Novokubishevsk refinery in the Samara region. This facility is critical for processing Siberian crude into refined products for distribution across southern Russia, and its disruption created cascading fuel shortages that rippled through the southern and central regions of the country. Days later, the campaign continued as the Astrakhan refinery near the Caspian Sea, a vital node for southern cities and key export routes, was also attacked, further crippling the nation's fuel supply network. Then, on September 14th, a drone was intercepted over the Kryvyi refinery near St. Petersburg, which is Russia's second largest facility of its kind. Debris from the interception fell directly onto the plant, igniting a major fire. The Kryvyi refinery processes around 20 million tons of oil annually, supplying Russia's northwestern regions and exporting refined products abroad. This single attack was assessed to have cut the refinery's total output by half. Reports that emerged just hours before this script's completion indicated that a second successful strike was carried out against the same facility, threatening to neutralize its remaining operational capacity entirely. By the end of September, this sustained campaign had eliminated approximately a quarter of Russia's total refining capability, representing a daily production loss of 236,000 tons of fuel. Currently, 4 of Russia's 5 largest refineries are either offline or operating at severely reduced capacity. This crisis is severely compounded by Russia's inability to conduct timely and effective repairs. After decades of reliance on Western technology, its most advanced refineries are dependent on specialized components, proprietary control software, and essential catalysts from global industry leaders such as UOP and ABB. Since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, international sanctions have completely severed Russia's access to this critical equipment and expertise. Attempts to source replacement parts through third-party countries have proven largely ineffective, a process akin to trying to repair sophisticated modern machinery with outdated and incompatible components. Consequently, repairs that would have previously taken a matter of weeks now stretch into months, with some expert estimates suggesting that a full year or more could be required for complex restoration projects. The combination of direct drone damage and sanctions-imposed repair delays is now responsible for an estimated 70% of Russia's total gasoline production shutdowns. This immense pressure forces the remaining operational plants to run far beyond their safe limits, compelling them to postpone essential maintenance and dramatically increasing the risk of industrial accidents. A series of recent fires at the Yaroslavl oil refinery and the Lukoil pumping station underscores the growing fragility of Russia's entire energy network. The consequences of this strategic campaign are now being felt acutely across the vast expanse of Russia. At least 10 major regions, from Ryazan and Nizhny Novgorod in the west to Primorsky and Zabaykalsky in the far east, are experiencing severe fuel shortages. In many areas, fuel deliveries have ceased altogether, and the stations that remain operational have been forced to impose strict rationing. These measures include banning canister refills and, in some cases, requiring government approval for fuel purchases. Ordinary drivers report waiting in lines that stretch for miles, a testament to the growing desperation. In Russia's Far East, regional authorities have been compelled to implement a coupon-based rationing system to manage increasingly scarce supplies. The situation has become particularly dire in occupied Crimea, where over half of the peninsula's gas stations have been closed for weeks. The wholesale price of fuel in the region often exceeds the legally capped retail price, making it economically unviable for station owners to continue their operations. This has led to the closure of at least 300 independent fuel retailers across Russia since May. For those who manage to remain open, the logistical challenges are immense. Tanker deliveries are delayed by 2 to 3 months, and owners are required to pay upfront for dispatches, a practice that drains their working capital. Crucially, if a fuel tanker is destroyed by a Ukrainian drone while en route, the station owner is forced to bear the full financial loss. This disruption extends from the home front directly to the front lines. Russian troops stationed in Donetsk and Luhansk reportedly spend hours in queues to refuel their military vehicles, often receiving rations so small that they must supplement them with their own funds. Melitopol, a critical logistics hub located at the intersection of the E58 and E105 highways that supply the southern front, has reportedly received no new fuel deliveries since the beginning of September. This directly degrades Russia's combat effectiveness and logistical capacity across the entire southern theatre of operations, impacting its ability to sustain military actions. Faced with a collapsing domestic supply chain, the Kremlin has been forced to take a desperate step: importing gasoline. This is a measure that has not been seen on a significant scale since the 1990s. To expedite deliveries, the government has waived the 5% import duty on fuel from countries like China, South Korea, and Singapore. However, this solution comes at a tremendous financial cost. Global gasoline prices are approximately 50% higher than Russia's heavily subsidized domestic prices. To prevent widespread social unrest, the Russian government is now forced to cover this significant price differential directly from its national budget. Based on an annual consumption of 38 to 40 million metric tons, importing even a modest 15% of its needs, which amounts to 6 million metric tons or 7.8 billion litres, would cost Russia between $6.2 billion and $7 billion annually at current global prices. With the government subsidizing roughly half of this cost, the Kremlin is spending an additional $3 to $3.5 billion per year just to maintain a basic level of fuel availability for its citizens and its military. Belarus was the first nation to offer assistance, increasing its fuel exports to Russia by 36% year-on-year in July, and by a massive 168% month-on-month in September. However, Belarus is not an energy giant. With an annual production of only 3 to 4 million tons, it can provide a maximum of 150,000 tons per month, which is only a fraction of what Russia desperately requires. Furthermore, this assistance comes at the cost of creating fuel shortages within Belarus itself, and is tied to Russia's financing of an $11 billion nuclear power plant that Belarus cannot afford on its own. In conclusion, Ukraine's strategic campaign against Russia's energy infrastructure is achieving significant and undeniable results. It has successfully transformed one of Russia's greatest economic strengths into a critical vulnerability, imposing massive costs on the Russian state, degrading military logistics, and fostering discontent on the home front. The combination of physical destruction from drone strikes and the inability to repair the damage due to Western sanctions has created a vicious cycle. The war destroys refineries, the resulting fuel shortages drive inflation, and the economic policies needed to combat that inflation stifle the very growth required to fund the repairs. With military expenditures now consuming an estimated 41% of the national budget and inflation persisting at around 10%, Russia's economy is severely overheated. Protests organized by the Communist Party and widespread anger expressed on social media over black market profiteering indicate that public resentment is growing. The daily struggle at gas stations serves as a constant and tangible reminder to the Russian people of the war's true consequences. As long as Ukraine can sustain its long-range strike capabilities, and some analysts believe they are now producing drones faster than Russia can repair its refineries, this pressure will only intensify. This will further challenge the stability of the Russian regime and its ability to continue its war in Ukraine.